Welcome to the 15th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, joined by a man who is wise beyond his 58 years. It's Scott Beck. Scott, we're going to start with some mailbag. We've got three mailbag items. Two were regarding last show's NAIA versus NCAA comparison. I like that people are into it because one said, I'm all in on Brianna Gonzalez. I think she could beat Ogun Sanya at 117. Of course, he was an Iowa fan. And the other said, hey, what about Life University and Anea Falcon? She's beat all three of the Hawkeyes. She probably has an argument with Sage Mortimer at NCAA level, but I like that we get feedback on that.
Yeah, I mean it's great. Bring it on, please. We just we're talking about what we think, but we're open to any views, and we love the fact that people are listening. And if we're wrong, correct us. If you have something we should talk about, please let us know. We encourage it.
We got some athlete feedback, and one of that was, how do you call a fall or a pin, whatever you want to call it in wrestling vernacular? Let's start with this in freestyle. The idea of a touch fall, it doesn't exist. It hasn't been there for a while. And I think this comes from people wondering why the fall isn't called quicker than it does in dual meets, in competition, wherever you see it. And we were able to get the rule book on the UWW and NCAA or college wrestling rule book on what constitutes a fall. And it was interesting reading that in college competition, according to what they're saying, is it's going to take a full 2 seconds before you call a fall. In the UWW rule book, it said sufficient time. So you have kind of some ambiguous language there. Probably when you're watching women's freestyle wrestling right now, just assume that it's going to take a little bit longer than you thought, and there's no touch fall.
Yeah, I mean the touch fall thing got taken away years ago. And it used to be like if somebody souped somebody in a belly to back soup play and just went straight back and the blades hit instantly, that was a fall. Or if somebody was gutting somebody and they stopped there for hit both shoulders, it was instantly what they called an auto touche. I don't like in the women's college rulebook, 2 seconds seems like an awfully long period of time to me for freestyle. And in fact, I'd argue I don't know what the rulebook says on men's collegiate, but it's not 2 seconds. They call falls quicker than that. And I like the sufficient time. And what it does, though, it opens it up for interpretation, which, kind of the way I think about international wrestling at falls is kind of most referees kind of look at each other. And if you kind of pinned, they'll call a fall. Every so often, you'll have a ref that seemingly takes a credit card out and tries to put it under the blades. That's really much more of a folk style situation. Normally, if you're almost pinned and you're kind of there, it's a fall. And the answer to that would be then don't be almost pinned. I do think relative to what I see internationally, I think domestically on the college freestyle, we're calling the falls too slow for sure.
And as we've talked about, just some of the nuances of women's college duels, where a lot of times you don't have the three officials. It's up to the referee just to be able to see that fall. So he or she may be on the opposite side and doesn't see it. And you don't have the help from a Matt Chairman. So you are kind of dealing with some different things at play with college dual meets that you might not see in international wrestling.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can see situations internationally where the ref kind of, you know, debating whether to call the fall, and then he looks up and he sees, whether it's the chairman or the judge put their hand up, and then he finally does it. So where they're kind of saying, "Come on already, it's a fall," where it's really up to that one ref, and maybe they, want to make sure. But again, for the most part, if you're close enough, then I'd like to see the fall just called.
But no matter what, if there's someone you're cheering for, it's never going to happen fast enough. That the rule is still there that if you're cheering for someone that you care about, it's you want it a lot quicker.
Or the other way is when you care about somebody and they're on their back and you're like hoping they can get off and you know that you're just waiting any second the ref's gonna put the hand up and then it's over. So yeah, it's I guess it's whoever it benefits, it can be anxiety filled either way.
So appreciate the feedback on the NCAA versus NAIA debate. We talk about the NAIA championships coming up, it is just going to be a fight to the finish, especially with William Penn adding. We don't know what they're going to have for their final lineup. Grandview, Life University, Providence, Southern Oregon. This really is going to be a race to the finish. So regardless of what you think about the NCAA versus NAIA, NAIA has an incredible tournament that's probably going to come down to the wire. Be ready. It's going to be outstanding.
Yeah, it's going to be a great team race, and you don't know how it's going to ultimately play out. Normally, when you have like wide open races with multiple teams, like people can hurt each other, in ways that you don't really think about. So a big win by one team may actually vault a team, another team over the team that got those points. Depending on who's in what weight classes. But it's going to be very exciting, and I can imagine scenarios where it's really up in the air and nobody knows what's going on until you really see the scores. I think it can be that close.
And this leads into a dilemma that everyone's talking about right now, and that is what will the NCAA do next season as far as qualifiers? Right now, you can qualify up to 15 for the national tournament. Everyone's kind of saying what happens next year if you go to 10. Everything I hear at the coaches convention is that nothing is set yet. It could be 10, it could be 12, it could be 15. And the one thing we do know for sure is we talk about the NAIA versus NCAA. If they go to 10, if NCAA goes to 10, NAIA coaches have said we will use that against you because we can get 12. And so just the idea that we can qualify more than the NCAA, come, you could be part of that 12. It's a great recruiting tool for the NAIA to have. So if they do go down to 10, I think it's going to be a mistake for the NCAA. I think if they're smart, at minimum, they should probably go with the 12 qualification system.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's different than men's wrestling, but I like the idea that you could have multiple people in the weight, from a recruiting standpoint, let's say a team gets set and you only have 10 qualifiers, an athlete may not go to your school. And then what's to say that you don't have an injury that year where you would have needed that extra athlete or the flexibility to have kind of backup? So I think it makes it more exciting and more fun and the dynamic of the tournament better to have more than one. And I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they try to match it. I've talked to some coaches as well, and nobody seems to know. Like to your point. So we'll see what they do. And if they don't and they go to the 10, then I think it creates an advantage for the NAIA to get some more athletes in, which is good.
So again, completely up in the air, but let's just say hypothetically it goes to 10. I think everyone's asking what happens to the University of Iowa at that point. So if you get roster caps, you're going to be capped at 30 if they go that route. So everyone's saying they're so deep, which they are, and you have a situation at 110 where you have three quality wrestlers. I don't know in the history of college wrestling you've ever had a debate like this on who's going to be in the lineup. So I have no clue how Clarissa Chun is going to make this choice. We've already said Ava Bayless is a lock there, but then you have a situation where Val Solorio has beat Ava Bayless in a wrestle off early in the year, even though she lost to her later. And then you have Emily Gonzalez, who is a returning national champion. She beat Solorio early in the year 6-2. And then the most recent Solorio wins 8-0. So you could potentially have one of your better wrestlers on the bench and maybe a returning national champion not going to the national tournament. So as it leads to that, what do you do? 207 is just as deep. You have four deep for the University of Iowa. So if you have that with 10 qualifiers, it's just going to be Ava Bayless at this point, and two quality wrestlers going to be left on the bench. So I just think there's going to be a lot of questions on what happens to Iowa if you go to 10 qualifiers next season.
I mean, I think you'll have, ultimately, I think you'll have people probably leave. I mean, I don't know who, and I can't give any insight into how do you pick of those three. I mean, there's pros and cons for everybody. It's a tough call, and I always like to say, as I've said a lot here, some of these problems are good problems, but sometimes maybe they're not so good problems. They're too much. I don't know I really don't know what you do, and I'm really hoping that they have more than 10, and some of these athletes get to compete in the tournament. It's tough.
People are predicting maybe a mass exodus for that situation. And it's not just Iowa, it could be North Central, it could be King, it could be Grand Valley if you have that situation. But I think in the case of the University of Iowa, I think the allure of being at the University of Iowa, you're trading off being an instant celebrity. You could be number 30 on the roster and you will be a celebrity at the University of Iowa. You get to be there at the men's duels. You get to be in front of everyone when you win a national championship. You get to go to those football games, get pictures, selfies, post that on Instagram. you are a celebrity. And you know that from your experience. Your daughter was part of the Hawkeye Wrestling Club, and there are 5 women in there, and they were absolute rock stars when they showed up to dual meets. Scott, I think that is so alluring, and to transfer out from that just for the possibility of an All-American, I think that's hard to give up on.
Well, I think it depends on what your goals are. If your goal is just to be an All-American, a lot of those athletes will hang around. But if your goal is to be a national champion, you may not get to wrestle in the tournament. That's a different story. And it is they are rock stars in that community. It's not just like at the wrestling match. I mean, people recognize them, at the diner, and a Bluebird, I think it is. But it's the town. It's just such a wrestling town. And I was listening to a Flow Radio Live, and they were talking about Bo Bassett going to Iowa and choosing Iowa, and it's like an athlete like Bo Bassett is charismatic, has such a following. You know, right now, yeah, it's hard to argue that I was at the moment better than Penn State. I mean, Penn State's just been dominant, but going to Iowa, what an athlete like that does, number one, it gets other athletes here, but he is literally going to be a rock star in that community, like a Spencer Lee. And he has a bigger following because of what social media was and what he did on that. So it's hard to overestimate, what it's like to be a wrestler in Iowa. I mean, it is like somebody once said to me, my wrestling coach actually in college, who was from Iowa, he said, there's only 3 things in Iowa. My wife's from Iowa, so I guess I have the right to say this, but 3 things in Iowa: God, corn, and wrestling. And I'm not sure about what the right order is.
But it is fanatical, and when you look at that Iowa wrestling on the women's wrestling product, you are going to Flow Wrestling premieres for the Lady Hawks documentary. You're dressing up for that. You're getting attention. You're getting minimum 4,000 fans, which is most more than most Division One men's duels. You're in front of people. You're getting seen nonstop. So it is an incredible, incredible thing that you have at the University of Iowa, and the presence that you have. Having worked at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum for 16 years and longer than that in the sport, the 2 lies I hear the most are my grandpa was an Olympian, or I was an Olympian, or I wrestled for the University of Iowa. And it is so alluring to be able to tell people I did that, that I just think it's going to be hard to walk away from for some of them. Some of them might say, I need to go a different path. But again, we don't know what the qualifiers are going to be. If it's 15, I think a lot of those problems are solved. Then you get half the team able to go to the national tournament. But in this situation, even at 207, they are 4 deep. They have 4 wrestlers that could be all Americans, and you're only going to be able to send 2. What happens to the other 2? Maybe that carrot of wrestling in front of a Carver crowd in a dual meet is enough for you to sustain yourself through the course of your college career, but decisions will have to be made for some of these high-end programs.
Yeah, I mean, just the worst case scenario is if it goes to 10, because the idea you can always say to somebody, you're going to get to compete. You may not be the full-time star, maybe there's somebody better than you, but you're going to be in the room with a lot of great partners. You're going to keep getting better, and you will get to, hopefully you're one of the other 2 or the other 5 that get to compete in the national tournament. We'll see how it plays out. Again, this is all new. It's a changing landscape. The good thing is that the women's wrestling is going to be, an NCAA Division One sport, Division One, 2, and 3, but sanctioned sport with a true title, and then we'll take it from there. And that's not to say that they don't start it one way and make tweaks along the way, which I hope everybody's open to that. The idea that whatever is done is not like etched in stone, and that adjustments can be made.
And kudos to these Division Three programs for competing as well as they do and getting some of these high level wrestlers. They just had the D3 National Invitational. You got Olivia Shore winning a gold medal there at 101, Isabella Frezzo winning a gold at 110, Lexi Geniak, who is a age level world medalist, she's winning at 131. So there's some quality girls at Division Three, and keep in mind there's no athletic scholarships. They got to pay back their student loans. They don't get the packages where they get $1,000 gear package. They have to pay for their own equipment. So what these Division Three coaches are doing, and one that comes to mind for me, actually two, Jeff McGinnis at Simpson College, he's doing an outstanding job of developing these girls. Brady Kiner up the road at Wartburg is doing a fantastic job. Both those are Division III programs. You see a lot of the development when they get those girls in there. They are getting better. Of course, Joe Norton at North Central is the benchmark for that. They won a national championship in 23 and got second last year to Iowa. But these Division III schools are doing a nice job.
Yeah, and they're fighting an uphill battle, especially as NIL money could be available now to some of the athletes. And I've always wondered. You and I have talked about the Battle of the Bergs with Division III men with Wartburg and Augsburg. It's just amazing that they get these type of programs without the money and the scholarships. But people do go for the coach in many cases, and a good coach that builds good program and an environment and a good team camaraderie. I think that's alluring to a lot of people, and I think there's a lot of women, especially as we've talked about, watching the matches where there's so much more Inuit mat side. If you have a good camaraderie in the team, maybe your goal is not to be, a world team member, a national champion. You just like wrestling, you like the experience, and you still can be very good.
This next 6 months will be so fascinating to follow. I think this is going to be some of the most exciting times in women's wrestling just to see what happens, what plays out, and how this all develops. So glad we get a front row seat for all of this. We have to mention this. We missed it last week. Mariya Stadnik retires at the age of 36. Two Olympic silver medals, two Olympic bronze medals, five Olympic teams, two world golds, three world silvers, one world bronze, 10-time world and Olympic medalist. What an outstanding career. Can't say enough good about what she's done for women's freestyle wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, she's Ukrainian and then wrestled for Azerbaijan. Just an absolute hammer. Her husband Andrei, who was her coach, I guess they're divorced now, I believe, but he was an Olympic silver medalist. Just an absolute competitor. A great double, fierce on top, great gut wrench. And it just reminds me. You saw a little bit. She was like pretty dominant and always competing for gold medals. And then I remember when Yui Sasaki, it was at the Clip-On tournament. She must have been 16 or 15 or 17. I forget the exact age, but she wrestled Stadnik in the finals in the whole arena. It's a very small arena at Clip-On. Everybody's going nuts. And she beat Stadnik. I think it was 1-1 or 2-2. Jumped in with coach, shook his arms, and the place went nuts. And you knew there was kind of a little bit of a changing of the guard. I think the next time they wrestled, I think it was a World Finals, Sasaki Tech Stadnik. But Stadnik kept going, very fierce. The last time that Sarah Hildebrand wrestled her, she beat her, and it was a good match. It was very back and forth. I think they both turned each other, but ultimately Sarah just came on in the second period, fought off some good turns and won, handily. But that was a great match. I mean, she's just been a staple in that 50-kilogram weight class, along with Sasaki and Sarah, and just utter competitor, And I remember seeing, my daughter showed me a video. They were like, I think in a park, and she was like with her son. So she and Andre had a son, and you see her holding his leg in the air and just moving him around. He's jumping on one foot and just very athletic. And I'm saying to myself, this kid's going to be good. He's got the DNA, and he's going to be very good. Congratulations to a great career for her and just an absolute fierce competitor.
How do we celebrate our women's freestyle wrestlers more? Just looking back to the Grandview Open, there were 6 Olympians at that tournament, and it kind of went anonymous. Ayla Miracle was there. You had Clarissa Chun was there, Tonya Verbeek from Canada, and then the two Nigerians, Esther Kolawole, Christiana Ogunsanya, and then Sammy Henson happened to be there as well. It just seems like we don't celebrate our best as much as we should. And that even goes with current senior level wrestlers, because once you get out of college, you go into the senior circuit and the senior scene. It just seems like they aren't as relevant and we don't talk about them as much. And you just think of a Felicity Taylor. She's doing something right now. I don't know exactly what it is, but she's doing something. Dom Parrish, is she going to come back? So I wish we could have a heightened awareness for the senior level wrestlers and what they do.
I mean, I guess, it's got to start somewhere, and hopefully we're helping it. I think people need to be aware of who these people are, what their accolades are, and the younger fans, now with social media, with film and video and YouTube, where you can go back and watch the matches. I mean, you're not just talking about Olympians, you're talking about world champions, Sammy Hansen world champ, you know Sean world champ, Verbeek, three-time medal. I mean, Kayla Miracle, two-time world silver. These are just phenomenal athletes. And I think we got to promote it. People have to be aware of the history of the sport, and hopefully the things like, I'm not trying to be self-promotional here, but hopefully, it's incumbent on us to tell their stories and talk about them. And, maybe, people should announce it. They should. Look who's in the house, give people a shout out. The tournament promoters, can be a little responsible for that as well. They should have a sense of who's there and let people know. It's always been amazing to me. This is a funny sport. You could be walking next to an Olympic gold medalist and nobody knows who the hell they are. It's kind of shocking.
And I thought about that with Kayla because I didn't know she was going to be there. And it's still cool. I geek out. It's an Olympian, Olympian, two-time world silver medalist. And to think that she's just fresh off that and she's in the corner coaching Valiant, it's cool to me. And I think it would have been a cool picture had I thought about that to be able to organize that to get the 6 Olympians at the Grandview Open because 3 of them are international, 3 of them are from the United States. That's a neat thing and it celebrates diversity. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love when you're seeing matches. You could see it with men, but also now with women, now that we're, the sport's growing and we're getting a lot of these great athletes, are coaching where you look at a match and say, okay, Olympic gold medalist, world silver medalist. You just look at the corners, and you see who's in the corner. I mean, that's really fun to me where you look at that. I mean, I just don't, maybe you and I are fanatics and everyone's not like that, but I think there's some of them out there, and I think we just got to keep promoting it. And it's incumbent upon the community to be aware of who people are and promote them. People don't realize, like, I know they're not professional baseball pitchers or they didn't play in the Super Bowl. This is just as hard to be a world medalist in this sport, to make world teams, to make an Olympic team, Olympic medals. I would put that against doing anything in any endeavor in life. It's just as hard.
Tonya Verbeek from Canada, an assistant coach at the University of Iowa, completely underrated. 3 world medals, 3-time Olympic medalist. I wish she didn't have to walk as anonymous. I think people are knowing who she is now that she's at the University of Iowa, but a complete hammer. If you watched her, she beat Helen at the Dave Schultz Memorial International when they had that, and she was just an absolute savage on the mat. And so the more we can celebrate her and her accomplishments, we had a conversation with some of the Japanese coaches, and they loved Tonya Verbeek, and they talked about
Oh
how good
yeah.
a coach she is and how much they respected her. In Japan, she's probably a bigger name than she is in Canada.
Well, especially, she made a world team at a very young age, then went through a very long gap where she didn't make another team, I don't think, till late 20s. But all 3 of her Olympics, I think she has 2 silvers and a bronze. I believe all of them, the only person that beat her, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, was Saori Yoshida um, from Japan, who's a 13-time world champion and 3-time Olympic gold medalist. So that's who she's losing to. All right. So when she was just a hammer, and if a person named, Yoshida didn't exist, she would have won multiple Olympic gold medals. And the other thing that's amazing about Tani was when she was coaching, she wasn't just coaching the women's team, world team, senior world team in Canada. She was coaching the men's team as well. So this is a person with tremendous accolades, tremendous coach. And yeah, people, they should know who she is. And it's a shame that perhaps she's more well known in Japan. I'll tell you this: she's pretty well known in Canada, but I think she's becoming well known in the U.S.
Let's go into that. There was a senior level tournament, Zagreb Open. The U.S. women had a big tournament across the board. Let's start with 2019 world champion Jakara Winchester and her last second, quote, escape that she had. They had to go to the review. It looked like they could have awarded 4, but you paused it right at the time where it could have been exposure, and it looked like the time ran out. But Jakara Winchester wins the gold at Zagreb at 57 kilograms, and she is coming home with the title. What do you think of that match?
I thought it was a good match. She wrestled Alieva, who's very tough, has wrestled a bunch of European finals. The only one she really dominates her has been Alina Kobe, has texted her, has texted her a bunch of times, but she's very solid. She's still pretty young. Alieva, I think, won U23 Worlds. And Jakara started out really fast, was scoring, I don't want to say at will, but, controlling positions, got a couple of turns after the first takedown. And then Alieva came back at the end. And I think Jakara didn't, almost went behind and kind of got baited into it. And then she had like a kind of a chin whip throw. It was as close as you can get without it being the four, but I think the right call was made. I freeze frame it and looked at it. It was right at the 90 degrees. But, Jacarra looked good in that match, actually, and again, I think it was more of a loss of focus at the very end of the match, but I think she could have probably opened up the scoring a little bit more in the beginning of the match and put it more out of reach.
Kennedy Blades wins an Olympic silver medal at 76 kilograms. She drops down to 68 for Zagreb. Essentially, it's 70 because they had a +2. Scott, she looks better than ever. She looks fast. She looks sleek. She looks technical. All the things that you'd want to see out of a quality wrestler. I think this is an exciting time for the United States when we know that one of our best wrestlers looks better than she's ever looked. And as we go back and just analyze what she did, again, some of those folk style techniques creeped into her matches. She hit a blast double in one of her matches, immediately goes for a half and gets the fall. Kennedy Blades, she's on fire right now.
Yeah, she looked great. I mean, physically, I thought she looked great. She was just quick. She looked lean. She looked amazing. She also went big twice, hit some big throws, which were probably the two best throws of the tournament, maybe even including Greco, because she launched people and she looked amazing. And, if I was one of her potential opponents, I would not be excited about having a wrestler. She's just getting better and better and really seems to be gaining in confidence and seems to not have some lapses that she has had in the past during matches.
And she won a match against Dotcher, and she's wrestled at the World Championships, and she made her look pedestrian. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
this version of Kennedy Blades, it's going to be scary if she goes down to 68 kilos for the World Team Trials and the World
Uh,
Champion.
I I'd like to see it. I mean, she looked good. I think she'll be a force, and I don't see anybody touching her.
Adaugo Nwachukwu, she also won gold medal. She won in the last second. I love this when you can pull out a win over a 2021 world champion. I liked her resiliency. She was down and she needed a takedown and a gut to win right at the buzzer. So Adaugo Nwachukwu wins the gold. It took some finessing at the end, but congrats to her. That was a nice win for her.
She looked good. Now, Dudova it doesn't do a hell of a lot, but is exceptionally difficult to score on. She's multiple world medalist, world champion, as you said. And what I really liked at the end of that match was Dugo tried a leg attack, didn't score, tried it again. The third time she got it. Then she's on top. She went to gut left. Dudova stopped it, and then Dugo jumped to the other side, which I don't think, which she did very quickly and just turned her. And I think if you watch the match, Dudova looked stunned. I don't think she knew what happened. All of a sudden, she's got a 3-0 lead and loses the match and just walked off kind of stunned and was not expecting, I don't think, number one, to get taken down, but I think she thought she stopped the gut. She was okay. And then Dugo really quickly jumped to that side. So kudos to her. A huge win for her. Dudova is a seasoned veteran. And it was the biggest win of Dugo's career, in my opinion.
We're seeing a little bit of a breakup at 76 kilograms. We talked about that as a storyline last season where you had all this depth at 76. Of course, you had to because you had to pick a weight, but I think there were 7 final Xers trying to go for the 76 kilogram spot. One of those moved down. Skylar Grote won the gold medal at Zagreb. I think she won a ranking tournament last season. So congrats to her for getting in the mix, going down to 72, which would be 74 if you get the +2. But Skylar Grote looked good.
Yeah, she looked very good. And, solid tournament. It was good to see her win. And she was gritty in that last match. Got stubborn when she had to be to pull it out. So, yeah. And it's good that, it's a lot easier with 10 weights than 6 for people to move around a little bit. The 6 weights is just not the right number, in my opinion. I think we need 7 or 8. Everybody that knows wrestling knows that for both men and women. 6 is wrong. It's just not right. And you get these log jams, and maybe they'll change it at some point. I don't see it happening in the imminent future, but it's a shame, really.
And at 76 kilograms, Yelena Makoyed. It looks like the Yelena Makoyed that won the 4 international ranking tournaments, won the World Cup, pinned a world champion there. I think we're back to that version. I hope so, because that version is world championship version. She's really good, and she looks solid at Zagreb over the weekend.
Yeah, yeah, when Lee was on a tear, she really did. It just came in her own, was exceptionally confident, and beat everybody pretty much. And then she had a down period. I don't know if it was fatigue, injury, scheduling. I don't know, but she definitely had a downfall. It's good to see her getting back into form, and to me, if you watch her wrestle, just kind of getting her confidence back. Wrestling, it's a physical sport, everybody knows, but it's very mental. And wrestling with confidence, makes a big difference. And she looked great.
Your final takeaways from Zagreb.
I think the U.S. in general looked very good. It was a good tournament for the team. It was good to see people get some mat time, and I think people also have things that they need to work on, and those get exposed. So I think it's a good start to the season.
But that's what you want. You want to get exposed early in the season so you know what we need to work on. But it does feel like we're building toward a quality world team. Again, we talked about that. We don't know what Sarah Hildebrandt's going to do. We don't know what Dom Parrish is going to do. We don't know what Helen's going to do. So there's going to be some fresh faces potentially, but it seems like the groundwork is there for a quality world team.
Yeah, I think the next crop of wrestlers, as we move into the quad, we got, I don't know what the some of those veterans are going to do or not, but we're going to have a solid team top to bottom. I don't see this U.S. team as we move the next couple of years having any weights where people are not medal contenders or if not favorites. We'll be very solid.
Let's end with this. Hope you remember this from last year. Kaura Coles won the U17 World Championships for Canada. So if you see her in the rankings for the United States, that's because she wrestles in Montana and then lives in Canada. So she's able to go back and forth. And if you watch that U17 World Final, she's absolutely stone cold. She gets the pin, stands up, absolutely no emotion. And she actually talked about her mentality, which was incredibly refreshing. And if we all could have that mentality, I think that we would be better off.
You can't just want to be the best wrestler. You have to put a lot of work to do that. But I have the mindset that I'm going to be the toughest wrestler out there, no matter if I win or lose. Going into that match, I wasn't nervous for it. I knew it was just another match. And so I know I don't always look like I'm super happy after I win matches, but that's just because I'm in my wrestling mindset. When I'm on the mat, that's time. That's the time to fight. And when I come off the mat, that's when I can do the celebrating.
She just takes care of business. She's a savage. And Kyle, you would send me that clip of her, in an MMA fight, and it's where she beat, I think, a 24-year-old or something like that, and she is just stone cold, just competitor savage, and it's fun. It's fun to see her compete. It reminds me, kind of like Bellamere, that just go out there and just want to rip somebody's head off with a straight face. I love it.
And so she doesn't really have the competition in Montana. So she decided as a high schooler to wrestle, or excuse me, go into the cage and try her hand with no mixed martial arts background, going against a 24-year-old who had mixed martial arts background. That's what she does for a living. She trains in MMA. She went out there and she dominated. And she had some great things to say about her wrestling background and what it meant to get in the cage with a wrestling only background.
Kaura, can we have a word with you? Hey, great fight tonight. Are you just 17 years old? Did I read the board right? That's pretty awesome. You look amazing for 17 years old. Great ground and pound, great wrestling. What did you do to prepare for this fight, your first MMA fight?
Actually, most of the preparation was for my wrestling. So, I don't actually train that much MMA, but I wanted to show all the other wrestlers out there, all the female wrestlers, that they're this close to becoming complete warriors, to be able to get locked in a cage and fight. So for all the female wrestlers that are watching, you're this close. Put in a couple hours of MMA and you'll be a warrior.
So keep an eye on Kaura Coles and what she can do, because she's a straight savage.
Could not agree more.